This is the typical process for setting up a deployment using BLT so that you can deploy some new feature or new module or something to a Drupal 8 site on Acquia Cloud. The first thing is you'll have some sort of task management system. Usually we use Jira, but in this case I'm using GitHub, using their project Kanban board. And I'm going to pick up this task, add the admin toolbar module and configure it. The site that I'm working on is my employee site, and I have the code base in GitHub, and it's a private GitHub repository, and it's integrated with Acquia pipelines. So I'm going to take a look at this story. It looks like I want to be able to use an admin toolbar, and it has some acceptance criteria to make sure that I can test it. And the implementation is basically add this module, configure it, and deploy it out to production so that administrators can use it. So the first step is I need to add the module to the code base. So I have my code base up over here, and right now I don't have any kind of local environment set up or anything like that. This is the code base for my project from GitHub. I just cloned it, and if I say Vagrant up, what this will do is bring up my local environment that I have already pre-configured. If this is the first time you're ever using the project, you can run BLT VM. That's a command that will build your local environment, configure everything, and get it ready to pull down your production database. Once the VM is running, I have a local development environment that I can use to work on this particular task. And if I go to local.eejgearling.com, that's my Acquia Cloud name here, then I should be able to load the front page of my local environment. And there it is. So whenever I start off a new ticket, I will make a new feature branch. I think I might have already done that. I'll do git status. I haven't yet. So I'll create a new feature branch for this ticket in GitHub. So I'll say git checkout-b jjg7. I'm on this new branch, and I'm going to reset my local environment, making sure I have all the latest local changes. So first I'm going to say git pull to make sure I'm on. I would actually do this on the master branch. So I'll git checkout master git pull, just making sure that I have all the latest code. So I'm going to go back to jjg7. And then now I'm ready to start my work. So I want to make my local site be up to date with the data that is on our staging environment. And that's what BLT does by default. So I'm going to say BLT local refresh, and I'll speed up the video while it's doing this so that you don't have to wait and watch. It usually takes a minute or so. So it looks like that took about a minute and a half this time. It varies depending on the speed of your internet connection, how your computer's running, all that kind of stuff. So the next step is I have my local environment set up. I'm going to log into it using drush at eejgearling.local ULI. That gives me a login. BLT by default scrubs your database so that when you pull it down locally, you don't have any passwords stored, so that if somebody gets control of your computer, they can't reverse engineer your password scheme and get passwords. So I use drush ULI. Now I'm logged into the website, and I can go to the extend page, and I can see the admin toolbar module is not going to be here yet because I've never added it to my code base. So I look for admin toolbar or toolbar. I can see that the core toolbar is there, but not admin toolbar. So I'm going to add that module to the code base, and I handily pasted in the command that I'll use for it, using Composer to grab the latest version in the 1.0 series. That corresponds to 8.x-1.x, whatever the latest release is. So I'm going to use that, and again, I'll speed up the video here because Composer can take a couple minutes. All right, so it installed the admin toolbar, the 8.x-1.18 release, which is the latest release, and it regenerated the lock file. So if I say git status, I'll see that it's updated my Composer settings, but it didn't actually add the module to the code base. That's because with BLT projects and with a lot of modern Drupal 8 projects, you don't actually commit modules to your code base. You have a build tool that will build your site when you deploy it. And that's what BLT is, and that's the point of this video. So I'll show you how that happens in a minute. But first, I'm going to now go back to my site locally. This is my local environment again that I just updated with this code base. And if I refresh the page, I should see that the toolbar, the admin toolbar module is in here now. So if I say toolbar, I see that admin toolbar is there. So I'll enable those two modules. And once they're enabled, now I can see if I hover over these things, I get drop-downs, and that's really useful for my administrators. I want to make sure that all authenticated users who have access to the toolbar also have access to the drop-downs, because it's really handy to have. So I'm going to go to permissions and find the admin toolbar section of them and give it to all my logged in users. So looking for toolbar in here. Use the administration toolbar. I want this for all my users. And I think that that's the only permission I need to add. Yeah. So I'm going to save that. And now I have all of the local configuration ready so that I can deploy this change to my other environments and get it tested. So the next step is I'm going to export my updated configuration. This particular website uses config split so that I don't have to do anything special to enable new modules or change things. So on my command line, I'm going to run drush at eejgearling.local config split export, or you can do sex for short, -y to say yes, split equals local. And if that works, it should export all the updates according to my local configuration settings that I have. And if I say get status, it should show a few changes here. So one is it enabled the module in core.extension.yaml, and another one is it added that permission so that all authenticated users can use it. So now that I have the new module in the code base through Composer, and I have these configuration changes, I'm going to say git add all, just confirm that they're all there, and then I can say git commit -m. I'm going to say jjg what is the issue number 7, add and configure the admin toolbar module. So commit that. And at this point, I can push this branch up to my GitHub repository. And you can see here, I have my pull requests. That one's not in here yet, so I'm going to say git push, and I'm going to push this branch up, -7. Now the branch is on GitHub, and now I can say hub pull request. Hub is just a tool that GitHub publishes that lets you not have to click a bunch of buttons to create a pull request. So I'm going to say hub pull request, and then it lets me add the pull request details, and I'm going to say fixes number 7, write that. And now it gives me the link to the pull request, or I can just come here and I can see that this is the pull request I just added to my own project. If I go in here, I can see that an Acquia pipelines build just got triggered. And this usually takes a couple minutes to run, but this is where all the magic is happening that BLT does behind the scenes. You can use Travis CI, you can use Jenkins, you can use CloudBees, which is Jenkins in the cloud. You can use pipelines. You can even run this thing locally if you don't want to have a CI server somewhere. But what it does is it basically regenerates your code base and then deploys it to Acquia Cloud for you with all the modules and all the settings and all your theme stuff intact. So I can check on the status of this job using the pipelines command line tool. I'm going to check and see if it's running correctly. And it should say that it started, so that's good. And in a couple minutes, this will finish. Once that's finished, I know that all my tests and all my code checks and all that passed. And then at that point, I can merge the pull request into my code base. So far, this has all been done locally and in the source code repository. The next step after this completes and I merge the code, pipelines will build an artifact and push it into this pipelines build master branch. And this is where the actual code that runs the site will live. And that's done. You can see down here that anytime that there's a commit to the master branch in our GitHub repository, it builds everything and then it bundles it up and then it sticks it in here, so that the development environment always has the latest code from the master branch deployed. BLT also includes some cloud hooks that are used to make sure that all the right things are run. So it runs a config import, and it runs a database update and whatever other commands that you need to run to get your site in working order. So from this point forward, all the deployment process is completely automated. Once I click that merge button, everything else is done behind the scenes, and I don't have to even look at it. So I'm going to fast forward the video here while I get this. I'm still waiting for it to finish building. Then once it's built, I'll show you it on the dev environment. So the job has finished in pipelines, and it's saying that the check has passed. I can show that and see that I got a green check mark, and if I refresh the page, it'll show a green check mark next to that commit, saying that it's safe to merge it without breaking tests. So I'm going to click Merge Pull Request, and now this is part of my master branch. And what Pipelines is going to do, or Travis CI or Jenkins or whatever tool you have, is once you merge the pull request into the master branch, it'll pick up a new build on the master branch, and then it will push that build up to Acquia Cloud. So I'm going to fast forward a little bit while that's happening, and then we'll jump back in. All right, so it's been a few minutes, and the branch has been deployed. So if I go over here to Acquia Cloud, I should be able to see that there's a job for Pipelines Build Master if I refresh the page. Let's see if that appears in here. Sometimes it doesn't pop in automatically. There it is. So now it's running that, and once that's finished, it'll let BLT do its Acquia Cloud hooks. It's going to import all the configuration. It's going to run the database updates. It's going to clear caches, basically do all the things that BLT automatically does behind the scenes on every deployment to any environment. So I'm going to speed this up until this completes. It usually takes a minute or two, but sometimes can be a little slower. Looks like that deployment's complete, so now I can test this in the dev environment. I'm going to go to my Acquia-dev environment, and I'm going to close out of my prod environment for now. And I'm going to log in to dev and verify that the menu should be there, and it should be available to my user account. And let's see, looks like it worked. So that was a successful deployment to dev. All I had to do was click the merge button in GitHub, and everything else happened automatically. So the next step is we want to take this code that we had in dev, and we want to put it on stage for the UAT process to make sure that we have the product owner have time to check it over and make sure they like it before we deploy it to production. Stage is also a canary, so that if the build fails here, or if we have some problems, we don't immediately deploy it to prod. We can fix those and then come back to stage again. The process for this depends on what kind of project you have and what your tagging strategy is, but basically for most of the PS projects, we take this master branch, we create a tag on it in the source repository first, and then we create a tag in the Acquia Cloud repository, and then we deploy that tag. So I'm going to show you how I first do it in the source repository. I'll call this tag 1.1.1. So I'm going to say get tag. So I'm going to say get tag 1.1.1. Whoops, I added an F. So I'm going to say get tag -d 1.1.1f. And it's a lowercase d. And then I'm going to say get tag 1.1.1. Get push tags. Now this pushes the tag to the source repository, and if you're using Travis or if you have a special kind of setup, you can actually have it deploy that tag automatically to cloud. In this case, with the pipelines build I'm running, I have to also make a tag in the Acquia Cloud repository on this pipelines build master branch. So I'm going to say cd /eejgeerling Acquia Cloud. This is a clone of this actual Acquia Cloud repository, which doesn't have my source code. It just has the deploy artifact that Pipelines built using BLT. So I'm going to say get tag. I can see that it has 1.1.0 build, which is the tag that's on stage in prod. And I'm going to add a tag 1.1.1 build. Well, actually, I'm going to pull first to make sure I have all the latest changes that were just made. If I didn't do that, then I would not be able to do a correct tag. So now I can say get tag 1.1.1 build and get push tags. Now it's going to put that tag onto Acquia Cloud, and if I wait a few seconds, it will deploy it. If I refresh, I think it should show up in the task log as well. There it is. It's saying that it got that new tag. So now on stage, what I normally would do is drag files back and drag the database back from prod to make sure that the prod environment and the stage environment match identically. So I have the same tags, the same database, the same files. Everything is identical between the two, except for, of course, the server that they're running on. So after this completes, I'm going to do my deployment to stage to test and make sure that everything works there. So I'll wait for that database to finish copying, and then we can deploy the code. Okay, so that finished. I'm going to switch the code to the latest tag, which is right here, tags 1.1.1 build. Continue, switch it, and then I will wait for this deployment to finish. This is using the same exact cloud hooks and build process and deployment process that the dev environment just used. So I'll wait for that and watch it. Okay, it looks like that deployment completed, and I can see that it's importing configuration, running database updates, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go to stage, and acting as if I were the product owner for the site, I'm going to go in and check and make sure that the acceptance criteria were met. So I'm going to log in with my user account, and then if I go back over to my ticket, as if I were a product owner who has no knowledge of the back end of this, I'm going to check I'm logged in as an authenticated user. When I visit a page, I should see the toolbar, and I should see options appear when I hover over options. And it should respond and work correctly on mobile devices. So I'm checking, looks like that's working. And if I'm on a mobile with, it also responds and works correctly in that case as well. And then I'll also check and make sure that these drop-downs are working. It looks like those things work as well too. So this ticket passes my testing, and it's ready to deploy to production. So following all this process, since we use this tag, and since stage and prod are pretty much identical, all I have to do to deploy to production now is first back up the database, always back up the database. And once that backup is complete, I can deploy the code, deploy the same tag to prod, and verify that the code all deployed correctly and that all the tickets are passing on prod as well. So I'm going to switch my code to that same tag. Also, another principle that we live by is you never deploy anything besides tags to staging or production. Tags can be repeatedly deployed, and you can also switch back to old tags much more easily than branches, and they don't behave in weird ways like branches sometimes can. And it makes it easy to do things like the exact same deployment to staging happens on prod, so you don't get any surprises when you deploy to prod. And I'll check on the progress of this here. And it looks like that completed successfully, so I'm going to go to my production environment now. So I'll close out of stage, go to production, and we'll see if it worked. And it looks like the menu is there. It's responding correctly, hopefully. Looks like it is. And I think that we're finished deploying this change to production. So a couple other quick notes since I have everything up here. One thing is once I deploy to production, then I'll usually pull the files in the database back to the other environments. That way, whenever people are running the BLT local or fresh command on their local environment, they're getting the latest content from prod and the latest code from the master branch as well. And I usually do that to the dev environment because that's where QA resources will spend their time QAing everything. So we want to make sure that they have the latest content and code as well. Once that's done, I'll go back over to my source repository and make sure that I'm on master branch at the latest. And now I'm ready to do another BLT local refresh and start over doing new work. Another thing that happens quite a bit that people ask about is how do you update a module? So let's say I have the admin toolbar module and I want to update it to make sure I have the latest version, or if there's a security release, how do I update that? I can see here if I go to the available updates page on my site, there might be a few things that have updates. So there's Panelizer. But if I had an update to just the admin toolbar module, I can run composer update Drupal admin toolbar. And what that would do is it would use the version constraint that I set up earlier. And that version constraint was caret 1.0. And what this version constraint says is whenever you run composer update, allow the module to be updated to any version in the 8.x-1.x branch. So 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, or even beta or alpha releases before there's a stable release. So that makes it a lot easier to update modules without necessarily breaking your site. So I would run that, and then it would give me a composer.lock and composer.json file change. I'd commit those, I'd push them up in a PR, I'd merge the PR would get built, it would be deployed to dev automatically. I would test it out. Once we have a release to put on staging, we'd tag it, we'd put it on stage. Once it's approved on staging, we'd put it on prod. And this process is what we use on pretty much all professional services builds, and it can be repeated ad infinitum. And that's kind of how we do all of our deployments.